I was already sitting in my seat, waiting for takeoff, when something happened that instantly made my stomach tighten. A flight attendant stopped beside me, leaned down close to my ear, and whispered something so strange that I thought I had misunderstood her. She quietly said, "Pretend you're sick and get off this plane right now." I stared at her in confusion. I almost laughed because I genuinely thought she was joking, but less than a minute later, she returned. This time, there was no smile on her face. Her hands were shaking, her eyes looked terrified, and in a voice filled with panic, she whispered again, "Please, I'm begging you, leave now." At that moment, I knew something was wrong, but I had no idea that 20 minutes later, I would realize this woman had just saved my life. Flying had never bothered me. I had spent nearly 15 years traveling constantly because of my work, and airports eventually started feeling like second homes. Security checks, delayed departures, crowded waiting lounges, long boarding lines. It had all become part of my normal routine. That particular morning, I was flying from Boston to Chicago for a corporate conference that could potentially change my career forever. My company had been considering me for a major executive position, and this meeting was my opportunity to prove I was ready. I remember feeling excited while driving toward the airport. Everything seemed perfect. The weather was clear, traffic was light. I reached the terminal earlier than expected and had enough time to sit near the gate with a coffee while checking emails. Nothing felt unusual, nothing felt dangerous, and looking back now, that ordinary morning almost became the final morning of my life. When boarding finally began, I joined the line of passengers slowly moving toward the aircraft. Around me were families carrying backpacks, business travelers speaking on phones, couples discussing vacation plans, and exhausted parents trying to calm restless children. The entire atmosphere felt completely normal. No panic, no warning signs, no indication that something terrible was waiting ahead. I found my assigned seat near the center section of the plane. I placed my briefcase above me, sat down, and relaxed while waiting for departure. To my left sat a middle-aged man reading financial documents. Across the aisle, an elderly woman was quietly knitting. A few rows ahead, two teenagers were laughing while taking pictures through the window. Everything looked exactly like every flight I had taken before. That's when I noticed her, one of the flight attendants standing near the front section. At first glance, she looked perfectly professional. Her uniform was immaculate. Her hair was tied neatly. She smiled politely at passengers entering the cabin, but after watching her for several seconds, something felt strange. She seemed nervous, very nervous. Not the kind of nervous someone feels during a busy workday. This was different. She kept glancing repeatedly toward the cockpit. Then she looked toward the aircraft wing outside the window, then back toward the cockpit again. Her expression kept shifting every few seconds. One moment she looked composed and professional, exactly the way every flight attendant is trained to appear. The next moment, something else slipped through the cracks. Anxiety, fear, maybe even panic. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Her breathing seemed uneven. She kept glancing toward the front of the aircraft and then quickly looking away. Even from where I sat, several rows back, I could tell something wasn't right. At first, I tried to ignore it. Everyone has bad days. Maybe she was exhausted after a long shift. Maybe she had received bad news before boarding. Maybe she was dealing with personal issues that had absolutely nothing to do with the flight. I convinced myself there was a perfectly reasonable explanation. The cabin around me certainly seemed normal enough. Passengers were settling into their seats. Some were texting family members before takeoff. Others were reading magazines or scrolling through social media. A businessman across the aisle was already typing furiously on a laptop. Two college students behind me were laughing about something they had seen online. Nothing appeared unusual. A few moments later, I noticed her walking slowly down the aisle. She checked seatbelts, closed overhead compartments, answered questions from passengers. Everything looked like standard pre-flight procedure. Then she stopped, directly beside me. I glanced up casually. For a split second, our eyes met. She leaned closer, not enough for anyone else to notice, just enough so her voice couldn't travel beyond my row. Then she whispered, "Sir, pretend you're feeling sick. Ask to leave immediately." For a moment, I thought I had heard her incorrectly. What? My voice barely escaped my throat, but before I could ask again, she straightened instantly. The professional smile returned, like a switch had been flipped. She continued walking down the aisle as though nothing had happened. I sat frozen. My heart began beating slightly faster. Did that really just happen? Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe she was talking to someone behind me. Maybe she had mistaken me for another passenger. That had to be it. There was absolutely no logical reason for a flight attendant to quietly tell someone to get off an airplane seconds before departure. It made no sense. I looked around. Nobody seemed concerned. Nobody appeared nervous. Nobody was packing up their belongings or rushing toward the exits. The atmosphere inside the cabin remained completely normal. For several seconds, I considered dismissing the entire thing. Then, I heard footsteps approaching again. I looked up. It was her, and this time, she looked completely different. The color had drained from her face. Her eyes seemed wider, more desperate. Whatever calm professionalism she had displayed moments earlier was gone. She leaned closer than before. Her voice trembled. Please. The single word instantly sent a chill down my spine. She swallowed hard. I can't explain right now. I stared at her. She glanced toward the front of the aircraft before looking back at me. Then she said something I will never forget for the rest of my life. If you stay on this plane, something terrible is going to happen. Every muscle in my body tightened. For a moment, I couldn't speak, couldn't think, couldn't even blink. The fear in her voice wasn't fake. It wasn't exaggerated. It wasn't someone playing a prank. This woman genuinely believed what she was saying, and that realization terrified me. I'm begging you, she whispered. Please get off now. Then she walked away. Again, no explanation, no details, nothing, just fear, pure fear. I sat there staring at the seat in front of me. My mind raced through every possible explanation. Part of me wanted to laugh at how ridiculous the situation sounded. Another part of me couldn't ignore what I had just seen. People don't risk their careers to warn strangers for no reason, especially not airline employees, especially not twice. I looked around the cabin one more time. Everything appeared normal. The passengers looked relaxed. The crew continued their duties. The engines hummed outside. Yet suddenly, the entire aircraft felt different, like I was seeing it through new eyes. I checked my watch. The doors would be closing soon. I needed to decide, stay or leave. Trust logic or trust instinct. Trust the airline or trust a terrified woman who clearly knew something she wasn't allowed to say. My pulse pounded in my ears. I thought about the meeting waiting for me after landing. Months of preparation, weeks of planning, career opportunities that could disappear if I missed this flight. Walking away sounded insane, but so did the fear I had just seen in her eyes. Finally, I made my choice. I stood up. A few passengers looked in my direction. One man frowned as I stepped into the aisle. I raised my hand toward another flight attendant. I'm not feeling well. The lie felt awkward, weak, but it was all I could think of. I don't think I can fly. Within moments, crew members were assisting me toward the front of the aircraft. As I gathered my belongings, embarrassment flooded through me. I felt ridiculous, like I was throwing away an important opportunity because of paranoia. Still, I kept moving, step by step, row by row, toward the exit. Just before stepping through the aircraft door, I turned around one final time. The woman who had warned me stood near the front galley. She looked directly at me. Then she gave the smallest nod imaginable. A silent confirmation, a silent thank you, a silent message. You made the right choice.